I know, right? You're like, throw me to the wolves. Here we go.
It's my debut, my YouTube debut.
Which is so fun because can I tell you, it's been the neatest thing to have all kinds of people who haven't done it before. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm the perfect candidate for you to do this with because I will help. I will participate. Okay, beautiful. All right, you guys, welcome everybody to today's Eat and Greet, where hopefully today we're going to give you something that is worth the time you took to show up. And I definitely think that we will, because this topic is one that comes up all of the time. And it's so fun because it comes up between, students and teachers. It comes up between astrologers, and still there's a debate on which house system is the house system and all of this good stuff. So I feel like anytime we get to have the conversation about housing systems, it's not lost on anybody ever. So today I've invited Miss Trudee Carroll over to sit with us and talk about this. This is so exciting. Welcome.
It is. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Wonderful.
Good.
Oh, so yeah, I am so crazed with house systems because I use various ones. I know some astrologers prefer just a certain one and they are really set on that one. But I think because I have a lot of mutable in my chart, I'm very Pisces. I have Sun, Moon, and Mercury in Pisces. I go with the flow a lot.
It's happening over there for you, right?
Yeah. So I like to experiment a little, let's say, with the house systems. And it's very interesting. Each one has its own special thing that you can gain something from. It's kind of like I look at life as, there's a lot of gray areas, and that's kind of like what the house systems are,
Yes, absolutely. I know. And depending on what you're doing or how quickly you're trying to do it or exactly what you're looking for, it really can get pretty gray, as to how you're going to figure this whole thing out, figure out which is yours. And I don't know about you, but I also know that a piece of it for me is which housing system just makes this chart speak to you.
Right.
Yeah, that's been my experience for sure. What about you?
Yes, well, I generally use Placidus primarily. At least that's what I start with. And I have found for me, it makes the most sense. Mm-hmm. So and I'll just give you an example. In Placidus, my Venus is exactly on my 9th house cusp. Okay. And I actually worked in the travel industry for about 20 years. So I find that very relevant. However, if you switch to meridian house system, my Venus is in the 8th house. Now, I can see where that might be relevant in my life based on events. However, I feel that because of what I brought to the world, more so than, let's say, outside resources, financial or relationships from others, as the 8th house is, what I brought into the world was definitely and is definitely more 9th house oriented, especially with all that travel background.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Yeah, wow.
So that's an example. And I like to use the whole sign house system. Just it's easier in one sense because all the planets are speaking to each other in the same sign in the same house.
Sure.
So for another example, I have Mercury in my 6th house in Placidus, which is definitely, I relate to because I'm always, daily, very mercurial. And yet, if it was in my 7th house, it would be right at the 0 degree of my 7th. And yes, I'm mercurial, speaking with others or in partnerships. So that's why I say there's a lot of gray area.
Right.
When you try to combine the 2 house systems or various house systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I want to come back to this so we can kind of talk about what makes them different, but also talk about what happens when you do try and cram them together. But I ask everybody when they come on, how did you even get started in astrology?
So I knew you were going to ask me that. So I actually, years ago, many moons ago, I like to say, many, many moons ago, I lived in Los Angeles, and I used to frequent the Bodhi Tree bookstore, which was a very famous, really kind of landmark there for New Age practices and people and interests. And so I started there. I learned tarot there. And then I branched out into astrology. And I just read a lot of books. I didn't really go to any teachers. And back then, there weren't the resources that we have now.
Sure.
We have so many resources, especially online, which is wonderful. And just mostly reading books and studying. And I took it a lot more seriously as a profession. I would say starting from around 2016. So it took me, I'm a late bloomer.
That's okay. I was only like 2 years ahead of you, and we had kind of a similar story in terms of all the reading and you're kind of learning and all of that stuff. And then, I don't know, for me, it was like it hit me one day. But what was your experience that brought you to professional practice?
Well, I felt like I really knew enough that I could explain it to others or help others. I mean, I did a lot of consulting, about 20 years of consulting, but it was for travel. So I was able to transfer those consulting skills. I thought I would be able to do that. So I said, well, shucks, I'm going to try. And
and here you are.
And I did do some local workshops, which I really miss now in these times. And it was really intimate and personal because they were small, but I guess you could say I got my feet wet that way. And it's very energizing. And, but, in travel, I always wanted to help people fulfill their vacation dreams. I was primarily a leisure travel consultant. I did other things in travel, but my main thing was leisure. And, it was just so wonderful when people came back and they raved about their travel vacations and such. But, so now I just want to help them with their charts and understanding themselves or about transits. I think the thing that really made me the most profoundly interested in astrology was Robert Hand's book, Planets in Transit.
Yeah.
The legendary.
Right. Yeah. So. And it's not a small read, by the way, if you don't have it. It's not a 5-page read. It's not you're going to get into some stuff.
No, and I don't think it's meant to be. I think you buy the book and you look at your transits and you try to understand them. And, so from all those many moons ago and all the years I spent doing that, it really helped me grow and understand and learn, about the patterns. And I could see how it affected me. And I'm like, well, this stuff is real.
Yeah.
this is really real.
That's a
So,
really profound moment, I think. At least it was for me, even in studying and doing all of those things. But as I like acquired more information and I had more life behind me as well to then apply what I read to, it is that magical feeling of like, oh my God, this is really real. Like I live in a cycle, just like everything else, whether or not I knew about the cycle. And just now I do.
and I would, start applying it to people I knew, relationships and so forth. And it was like, oh, okay, well, he's probably not going to be in a very good mood today, something like that, but it was true, and I had a friend, I said, just look this up on astro.com and just see what you think, and he's like, yeah, I was kind of feeling all those things every day with the transits. And it's like, yeah, there really is something to this. So, thank goodness for the internet now. We can learn so much and quickly. And, me, as I said, being so mutable, I like to absorb everything.
Yeah.
But I have to learn my boundaries, of course.
Yes. That's the trick of mutable energy, isn't it? To be like,
Yes.
oh, things do have boundaries.
Yeah, it took me a while to learn those boundaries.
That's fabulous. And so now that you are doing this in a professional capacity, what style do you practice? Which style of astrology do you practice?
I'm a modern humanistic psychological astrologer. That's primarily what I do. And I have Jupiter conjunct Pluto in the 12th house. So that kind of goes hand in hand.
You're like, let's get to the psychology of this.
Yeah, yes. And I will say I'm really not a historian on astrology. There are so many astrologers who are really into the mythology of astrology, which I think is great, but it's like whoosh, over my head. My little Pisces brain can just take so much. So I really try to be more in touch with the client. I have Sun and Moon in my 7th house. I'm really client centric, I guess you could say. So that's kind of where my emphasis is, not so much on the history.
Yeah, but that's a beautiful thing to hear and to recognize that. I think it's like a big deal for us to recognize that we can't be all things. And it's like, yep, I am maybe not going to know about this as much as I do this, and that those things are perfectly fine, and who knows? I know that in the beginning of my practice, I was more centered here. And what it looks like today is it's like, yeah, that's still in there, but the center is here now. And that's kind of the neat part, is being able to shed the phases, or not trying to stuff ourselves like into these astro spaces we don't fit. Somebody else fits there just fine,
Exactly. Now, that's not to say I don't like to learn more, because lately, I'm been really into asteroids now. I'm like beyond the planets.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. What is it about asteroids that's got you right now?
Well, what got me really into asteroids was an experience I had with asteroid Pandora with somebody. And where the asteroid was in my chart in relation to theirs in synastry, and events that ended up unfolding. And I'm like, OMG. Right. And there's Pandora. And I'm like, it's chaos, chaotic. It's out of the box. It's like, and we can't put it back in the box.
Right.
And it was mind blowing to me seeing that. And I thought, wow, I really need to study more about asteroids now. And so ever since I have seen, so much relevance in all these asteroids. I think it's just really like the next thing for astrology.
Yeah. Yeah. Sarah D. Haven came over and did a presentation on Lilith and Pandora, and it was fabulous. It was just fabulous. And I haven't spent a lot of time with, besides the primary asteroids, with a lot of them. So I just felt like I watched her entire presentation. I was like, I know I'm supposed to be hosting, but this is great. I'm learning so much.
It is. It just, like we always said in the travel industry, you can't know it all, right? Because it's such a big world.
Yes.
And, and I have a North Node in Sagittarius. Hello, travel. And now I'm just, instead of traveling on Earth, I'm traveling far beyond, right? Into the sky.
All over.
All over.
Just all over. Yeah. Well, that's absolutely fascinating. And we'll make sure that people have your links in the description box down below and stuff so people can find you and find out what else you're finding out about and make that connection. But
awesome.
Let's go back to the house system situation, because this is a question I get a lot with people who are just learning to study, or even sometimes people are a little bit more advanced, but it's like, well, which house system should I be using? That I feel like is a really hard question. So I would love to hear your take.
I think whatever system works for you is the one to work with. Everybody is an individual. That's why I say I'm Pisces. I like to absorb everything. That's just how I am. So maybe if you're Pisces, you want to really be able to absorb it all and explore it all. Same with Sagittarius. If you're Taurus, for example, you might be more fixed in, what is going to work for you, and, have a more definitive vibe towards the house systems. It's like, solidifying in a fixed way what you see. So there's no ambiguity, because there's certainly ambiguity, when you deal with different house systems. And I had this thought I wanted to also say, because I've been reading this a lot lately, how astrology is a pseudoscience. And that word bugs me, to call it a pseudoscience, even if it is, because I would really love to see astrology be called a language now. I think we're beyond science. It's a language. And astrologers are linguists. And, that's why you could consider all the different house systems like different dialects or different accents, right? So I think that I'd love to see the mentality of our community and the culture inevitably realize astrology is a language, and it helps you. It's a language you learn. It's not like a belief. Like we always say, well, do you believe in French? That's a language. It exists, okay? So astrology exists. It's a language.
Yeah, that's interesting that you're saying that, because I had a conversation with someone just a night or two ago, and we were talking about using astrology with business, and he's not in the astro world or anything. And he was like, do people buy into that? And I was like, well, there's nothing to buy into. And it was interesting, because what I was saying to him is, I said, well, if I hand you a chart and then I ask you to apply that, even if you can't understand what it says, is it not telling the truth? And he's like, oh, and so we had this conversation about it being a language. We just speak a different language around here. And so it was kind of neat, though, to see a person who's not in the astro community come to think of it that way, where it was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense.
And that's excellent, because he doesn't understand the language. That's all.
Yeah. I'm like, if it was written in French and you still didn't know what it said, would it still not have information?
Right. Exactly. That's right. Perfect.
That's fabulous. So when we're looking at these different house systems, what are the differences, in case people have never really worked with them? What are the differences?
So there are so many house systems. I'm just looking here on my screen. Okay, we've got Placidus. We've got, oh, I love this one. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. It's spelled K-O-C-H. So I looked it up online, and it's a German, it comes from Germany. So it's, in German, you would pronounce it Koch. Koch. And in America, for example, in English, you would pronounce it Kach or Cock, believe it or not. I always thought Coke, but anyway, that's another house system. There's Campanus, there's Regiomontanus. You have an equal house system. Of course, there's whole sign houses, meridian houses, porphyry. Oh my gosh, it goes on, really.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. Yeah. It's just like a different language.
Yes, and really, when we're looking at it, it's just the different way that we divide and look up the sky. That's all that we are doing, and then we bring it down to like a 2D place to look at it on paper. And you know, for me, I have a real hard time unless I'm working with perfections. Then I can use whole sign just fine. And obviously the method works beautifully there. But other than that, I have a hard time with whole sign because I'm like, you do not look up there and it is perfectly divided. But I'm also a Taurus. So I have a fixed method. You know, I'm good to go with my fixed method. But it's kind of that interesting understanding of it's just the way that we're dividing the sky. That's it.
Exactly. And you know, the main ones, I guess, that, you know, Placidus is the most popular, seems to be anyway, in modern Western astrology. And also I find there's a lot of astrologers, even who do modern astrology, that are into the whole sign house system. And I think, you know, that's because it's easier. And you do know that the planets are speaking to each other in the same house, whether or not, you know, they're in a different house, they're going to always be speaking to each other in the same sign. So I think for a lot of astrologers, that makes sense. And of course, whole sign houses is what traditional classical astrologers use. So that's a big difference. If you're, you know, obviously, if you're into the classical Hellenistic astrology, you're going to use whole sign houses. Mm-hmm. So modern astrologers would use more the ones where the pie, you know, the 12 different houses can be divided up in different degrees.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, you know, because the midheaven is such an important point in the charts, and I learned this recently, and I'm going to give credit to Frank Clifford for a webinar I attended with him, and you know, he uses equal house system, which is probably, I guess, the third most popular. You've got Placidus, and then whole sign houses, and then equal house system. I think if we were going to go with the three most popular, I believe that would be them. And what's nice about the equal house system that I found is because wherever your ascendant is at whatever degree, you know, that's what's going to be the cusp degree for each of the following houses. That's how the equal house system works. And so what happens is there's a difference between the midheaven and the zenith.
Yeah.
So, and the zenith is actually a really important point that actually initiates events even more so than a midheaven point. And so with the zenith, you could see it a lot easier on an equal sign, an equal house system, because you're at the same degree as the ascendant.
Sure.
So, and just to explain, the zenith is going to be, if your ascendant is 15 degrees Aries, your zenith, where the cusp is in an equal house system, is going to be, oh, I should have said Virgo. Okay, Virgo, let's say Virgo, because I know that I can figure it out easy, is going to be Gemini at 15 degrees. So 15 degrees Virgo would be 15 degrees Gemini for your zenith. But your midheaven degree could be different, so.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, to see the way that it shifts it, because in Placidus, your ascendant can be at whatever it's at, and then it'll just go around and calculate those 30 degrees through each of the signs. And so things end up all over the place, ascendant, descendant, midheaven, IC, those are always in perfect opposition. But then when you get to whole sign, it's just boom, this sign in this house. But then when you get to equal house, it's just specifically assigning those degrees. So it's this interesting just understanding of what you're looking at, and then all the cool things you can find within that. And if you've ever seen, you guys out there, if you've ever seen a Placidus chart and you're like, why does my fourth house look so small? Like, why did this system calculate it and it looks like it's this big, or something like that? That's the calculation method, which I just always think is really funny. I'm like, no, you got a whole house, I promise.
Right. And especially for people who are born in, very north or very south of the equator, that can really open you up, your houses up to, very expansive places, let's say. So, for people in that case, it might be easier to use the whole sign house system or the equal house system, because maybe because of that latitude, longitude, it's exaggerated. Those houses might be exaggerated. So there you go.
So there you go, right? So if you were going to, well, I don't think I want to ask that question. Here's what I think, and I want to know your experience. For me, it has been an advancement with the house systems. It's been an evolution, because I know that before in my little fixed method, it was just all Placidus all the time, And as I've kind of come along, I've opened a little bit more to other systems. And like I said, just depending on what I'm doing is when I will pull that housing system. But it's been a real evolution of being able to get out of my fixed placement. So I don't know, has that been your experience, or are you like, here we go, Placidus, we're doing it?
Well, I primarily, after studying a natal chart, for example, obviously in a consulting situation, you only have a limited amount of time. So I would always start probably with Placidus in a consulting situation. But for me personally, I would say I start with Placidus, but I look more in the transits. Now for transits, I will definitely consider more like a whole sign house situation.
Yeah.
Because I think that, once again, the planets are speaking to each other still. And I would also say, I forgot one other house system, really, that even if you don't know your birth time, you can use a solar chart, which is, your sun sign, based on your sun sign, and use the house system based on your solar chart. And then there's two ways to do that. Because
possibilities are endless around here. You're going to get a chart.
Because you can do it with as you would a whole sign system, where it's going from, say, 0 to 29 Aries, right? You could do a solar chart that way. So if you're, for example, a Virgo sun, you could do Virgo with the 0, starting at 0, no matter what degree your sun is in. And just, go around the chart starting from 0, like you would for a whole sign house. Or you could also start it from the actual degree of your sun sign. So if you're 15 Virgo, you would start it at 15 Virgo. And, then it would be more like an equal solar house system.
Right.
A combination of the equal house system and the solar house system. So there you go. So it's all a language, and it's just how you want to interpret it and express it, what accent and flavor you want to give it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's like recipes, dish a dash here, a dash there.
Yeah, I agree, because it's funny. I know I'll be on Placidus, and then, we're moving through the solar arcs, and I'm like, well, hold on, let's just take a minute and get some nuance. We got to go look at these perfections, because what exactly were you doing here? And it really does become the recipe of your particular consultation. Or I just really think, like, what are we trying to achieve here? That kind of tells you which tools to pick up.
I agree, for sure.
Yeah.
You want to, it's good if you have a goal. I think when you're seeing an astrologer or you're trying to do your own chart or whatever, you want to know, well, what is my purpose? Am I looking at a romantic question? Am I looking at a career question? But there's and this all goes back to actually a TV show comment I like to say from the TV show Lost, because, everyone always asks, why isn't astrology exact? Why you say it's an exact science? And I'm like, well, no one's saying it's an exact science. We're the variables. And that's what that TV show, that was the quote. We are the variables, us, it's like versus the free will and fate idea. We're the variables. So, it's really, astrology isn't meant to be like the end all be all, like, yes, it's this way and this is why, like, mathematics is precision, right? You use math, but it's really, at least for a psychological astrologer such as myself, it's just more a method for interpretation to see, more of an understanding of what the influences are, and then how you're going to, move through that influence and hopefully live the life of your dreams.
Yeah. All mistakes included, by the way.
Yes, we're perfectly imperfect, I like to say.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the beautiful thing about seeing an astrologer and kind of getting the astrological perspective of ourselves, is that I feel like it's worth the investment, because if you hear something in a consultation and you're like, no, this just doesn't work for me, astrology will happily refund your misery if you would like to leave with that, because we're the variables. Take it, don't take it, but we're trying to just speak the language and speak, I think, the next level of vibration or consciousness into our clients and into each other, as we use this tool. So that's
great.
So if you are newer to astrology, or you're taking different courses, or you're watching things online, to be clear, one system is not wrong. That's not really the way that it works, but you may find it may be easier to start in whole sign and work from there. Either way, once you pick up the way that you speak the language, then you'll be able to find your particular dialect and accent as well, which is kind of a beautiful thing. And during the YouTube Academy, we have our teachers presenting in both Placidus and whole sign. So you'll have the opportunity to experience what those kind of look like on both sides, which is not a far shake, by the way.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like it's a good time. So far, so good. I think we're doing all right. We've gone through history and astronomy, and next week we will jump into planets. So lots of fun coming around here for the next year.
Awesome. Oh, and I wanted to mention, I'm looking forward to seeing you at the OPA conference.
Yes, this will be my first year at OPA and at NORWAC, and I am thrilled about both of them. And I just love OPA to pieces. So, you guys, if you're not a part of OPA or you haven't checked them out too, by the way, please do. It's phenomenal astrological support and education, and just there's so much going on. Like, I feel like the astrology community is quite busy right now. What do you think?
We are, and it's amazing how many different organizations there are, and they're all very supportive of each other, and we kind of all meet and greet in different places now, online right now, but it's really amazing. I mean, and it's such a wonderful community. Overall, I'd say it's very supportive, and especially the professional astrologers. They're all like, yes, come on,
Come
learn and
in.
grow with us.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Well, I super appreciate you being willing to come just chat about this because it comes up all of the time. It just comes up all the time. So it's nice to hear different perspectives on it.
Well, I hope people, find it really fascinating, trying it different ways. And, you know, um, variety is the spice of life, they say. So, it's good to have a little variety.
It's good to have a little variety. And Trudee, before I let you go, we'll put the link in the description box down below, but where can people find you?
My website is trudycarol.com, and not to confuse, it's TRUDYCAROL.com. And that's where you can find me.
Yay. All right, you guys, I'll make sure it's down below, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the Astro Academy as we kick back off on Monday, where we'll be jumping into planets and introduction to them with Gordon Mullins and myself. But hopefully today we gave you something that is worth the time you took to show up and spend some few minutes with us. So I think we've done it. I think we did. So thank you again so much, Trudee.
Thank you, Stormy.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for showing up, and I will see you next